Welcome back to another episode of 3 True Scary Stories with the Spooky Moose. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's begin. A few years ago, my parents decided they wanted to downsize by selling our family home and move into a condo. My father had just retired and my mom was about to retire soon, and with my siblings and I being all grown and out of the house, they just didn't see a need to have it anymore. Everybody had their own thoughts about the situation, but we came together as a family to get everything cleared out of the home and ready for sale. I was finding things that I had forgot existed, but the coolest thing of all is when I found the old camcorder in a box in the basement with all the little videotapes boxed up next to it. I took it home and installed the batteries it required. I hooked up the red and yellow wires from the camera to my TV and began my trip down memory lane. Emotions took over as I began to watch the videos, one by one, seeing my siblings and I in kid form, and my parents not as old retirees. The first video I watched was of us opening presents on Christmas morning. As I'm watching it, I noticed a dark blur that moved through the background a few times, enough to catch my attention. At first, I thought the video was just old and had some sort of defect, but a few frames later, the shadowy figure stopped, so I was able to get a good look at it. It had the outline of a tall human. No one seemed to notice in the video, then it faded out of the camera's view and the video went on as normal. I thought I must be losing my mind because there was no way I could be seeing something paranormal on old family videos. I popped in a few more tapes, family beach trips, the few times we went to Disney World, but almost every video that was taken at our house, the dark figure would make an appearance. The way I would catch it moving about on camera was extremely unsettling. None of us in the video ever seemed to notice, which made it even more horrifying. That night after I was watching the videos, I was sleeping in my apartment when I had the most terrifying dream. In the dream, I was back in my old room at my parents' house, and my mom was reading me a bedtime story like she always did. I was looking up at her, and as she read, suddenly she looked different. The shadowy figure now sat on my bed, holding the same book. It had no face to distinguish. It was like staring into a dark void. An immense sense of horror washed over me in my dream. I remember feeling scared for my life. I did that thing I learned as a kid when I had bad dreams and essentially forced myself to wake up. I'll never forget the relief I felt when I opened my eyes to find myself in my own bed, realizing it was all just a bad dream. As my senses came to, I realized that my room was colder than what it should have been. I looked over to my window trying to find the source of the draft. The shadowy figure from the videos was standing in the corner of my bedroom. The dark figure stood out perfectly against the white walls of my room. It stood there motionless, then like a memory it faded from sight. I was paralyzed with fear. The only thing I managed to do was to put my head under the covers like a child. Eventually I fell asleep because the next thing you know, I was waking up to the sun coming into my window. I called my parents immediately and told them what I had saw on the old family videos, about the dream and about the entity in my room. My dad laughed it off and refused to entertain it. My dad eventually left the room while me and my mom were still on the phone. That's when she whispered to me that she had believed everything I had said and that she too had encounters with the shadow figure. A sense of relief and ultimate fear had came over when she told me that, because then I knew I was not hallucinating. I used to work as a maintenance guy at a huge gym in Arizona. My usual shift was the opening shift, which was from 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. I would fix all the little things around the gym that needed to be maintained on the regular, and it wasn't a bad job. One morning when I arrived to work, I found the front desk abandoned. I thought it was odd because Miss Tracy, who opened the gym and was the front welcome desk attendant, always stood there with her coffee in hand waving to me as I walked in every morning. Though we were technically open, no one had arrived yet, so I figured she had just ran to the restroom after she unlocked the doors. Not thinking too much of it, I put my things away and gathered my cleaning supplies. I began to make my rounds, cleaning and vacuuming as I saw fit. Our early bird members slowly began to arrive, hopping on treadmills and other pieces of cardio equipment. I made my way through the locker room and restroom areas to where the giant Olympic pool was. I would go into the pump rooms every morning to make sure nothing failed overnight so that we could ensure the pool was always safe to swim in. Everything was good, so I locked the pump room door and made my way back to the front. I realized that the main overhead lights in the pool had not been turned on, which typically Miss Tracy did every morning. She never forgot actually, which reminded me that I hadn't seen her when I came in this morning. Right as all those thoughts rushed into my head, I spotted something big floating in the pool. Without the overhead lights on, it made the area very dim, so it was kind of hard to tell exactly what it was. I walked over to the light switch and cut them on. Then I walked closer to the pool's edge to get a better view of what was in the water. Sadly, it was Miss Tracy floating face down in the pool. Motionless, she seemed just to float with the current of the pool. I immediately felt sick. In a panic, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. Before you know it, the parking lot was filled with emergency vehicles. They cleared the few people out of the gym who had just begun their morning routines. They all congregated outside on the sidewalk, waiting to see what all the commotion was about. I escorted the officers and the EMS to the scene where Miss Tracy was. They got her out of the water and laid her on the ground to administer CPR. I assumed it was out of protocol because everyone knew when she came out of the water that she was gone. You could just tell. They declared her DOA and proceeded to place a white sheet over her. So many questions had presented themselves in that moment, with the main one being, how could this have happened? Was there a chance of foul play? The next few hours would be hell because it turned into a whole investigation. They interviewed me and the members outside who were there when we first opened. When the management arrived around 7:30, they arrived to a whole crime scene, with caution tape and the officers blocking off the area to the pool. The officers explained what they knew so far, which was basically just my story because I was the first one there. It seemed like they wanted it to be some sort of foul play by the way they were acting. They inquired about our camera system, then my boss took them to the back to show them how to access everything. They walked out of the office 20 minutes later, gathered the corpse, and carted it away. When they all left out of the back area, I ran over the cameras to see what happened. She could be seen walking alongside the pool, a bit closer than one should be if they don't want to go for a swim. All of a sudden, she stops and leans over to pick up what looked like a towel floating in the pool. By her being an older lady, when she went to stand up, I believe she lost her balance because she just toppled into the pool. I watched her flail around wildly before she eventually sunk down into the pool. I watched in horror as Miss Tracy lost her life at the job she loved so much. They sent me home early that morning because I had seen a lot and it was hard for me to get myself together. We had grown close over the years of me working there. She was like the work grandmother figure. I never ended up going back to that job or that gym. They were upset, but they understood why. They didn't find her. I did. Hello, my name is Roderick and I am 28 years old. In the spring of last year, my aunt passed away sadly, and with me being her only living kin, she left her home to me. She wrote a letter explaining everything before she passed and said that I could sell it or keep it for myself. And since I loved my aunt dearly, I decided to keep the place. The house was located in a suburb outside of Portland. My apartment was actually in the city of Portland. I've been wanting to move for a while now, with my rent steady increasing and the crime and homelessness becoming more and more of a problem. Within a 2-month time span, I broke my lease and moved into my aunt's old place. I was comfortable there, visiting many times over my life. Though if I'm being honest, the last few years I hadn't visited much due to my career being very demanding and me just overall being mentally taxed. When I got settled in, I began to explore the neighborhood, taking my dog on walks to familiarize myself with my new surroundings. Everything was going okay for the most part, except for the guy next door who seemed to hate that I was living there. He was never friendly from the start, and after only living there a few weeks, we had exchanged words several times. He didn't like that I was a younger guy, now owning such a nice home, and he made it a priority to let me know that. He is an older guy and loved to talk about how he had worked hard for everything he had, blah blah blah. Just an overall jerk of a character. I have a calm demeanor, so I never let him get to me, and he could tell, so he began to do little things to try to get under my skin. When he would cut his grass, he would use his leaf blower to blow all the lawn clippings onto my property. Many days I had found random bags of dog poop thrown over my backyard fence that did not belong to me. On more than one occasion, my packages that were delivered were missing off of the porch. I knew it had to be the jerk next door trying to force me to sell the place, but it didn't work, and I just decided to put cameras up around my home. I made it a point to install them when he was home so that he could see that I was taking precautionary measures. He just sat on his porch drinking a beer and watched me the whole time. He would just randomly blurt out, "That's not gonna cut it," and there's ways around that. It was then when I realized that this guy was a pure nut job. This neighborhood is not a part of a homeowners association, so it would be up to me to get the evidence I needed to take to the cops in case things escalated. A week or two had went by without any incident, so I began to think I was out of the woods, until one night I was sleeping and I was awoken by my dog going crazy downstairs. He was barking up a storm. I brushed it off initially, not wanting to get out of bed, but when he kept going off, I thought I should get up and check things out. When I rounded the corner into the kitchen, I could make out a dark silhouette at the patio door. The house was pitch black, but when the person seen me approaching the door, they darted off. I pulled out my phone and called the cops, alerting them that there was possibly an intruder trying to break into my home. They arrived 20 minutes later, and after their inspection, they found that the lock to my back fence had been broken. And to top it off, the 3 cameras that I had installed had been spray painted black. With that being said, I had no footage of the intruder. I actually went to bed frightened that night. The next day, I begrudgingly replaced the cameras all around my home. All that day, I constantly looked out of the window, searching for anything and anyone who looked suspicious. At around 7 p.m. as the sun was going down, I was walking down the hallway upstairs when I heard a loud crash outside of my house. I ran downstairs to find a baseball on the floor, surrounded by shattered glass. Someone had threw a baseball through my living room window. There was no one outside when I checked, so I cleaned up the mess and put a piece of cardboard over the window until I could call out a repair person in the morning. As I was cleaning up, it hit me. I hadn't seen my crazy neighbor all day. That was very strange because he was always out on this porch drinking a beer or doing something in his yard. That night while I was lying in bed, I couldn't help but to think it was my neighbor causing me all this trouble. Around 1 in the morning, as I was lying there restless, something told me to look out of the window at my neighbor's house. I got out of bed and walked over to my guest bedroom, where the window looked out towards his property. In that very moment, I seen a dark figure slip out of the back door of his home and slowly make its way over towards my side yard. When I lost sight of him, I called 911, and luckily they had 3 officers to my house in minutes. I stared out that same window the entire time, watching the cops pull up with their spotlights and flashlights, basically illuminating the entire property. Before you know it, I heard them yelling freeze and for the person to get down on the ground. That's when I rushed downstairs and onto the porch to confirm what I already knew to be true. Sure enough, when they removed the ski mask from the man, it was literally my 50-plus-year-old neighbor who had been vandalizing my home. He acquired multiple charges, and because of his prior offenses, he actually got some jail time. He is still locked up currently, almost a year later. His son, who was away at college, since moved back home to take care of the house while his psycho of a father is locked away. He apologized for his father's actions to me, on multiple occasions, but I'll never forget the way that guy treated me. His actions made it hard for me to ever forgive him. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of 3 True Scary Stories told by the Spooky Moose. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And I'll see you back here again next week.